At this point, I'm feeling very let down. It's the minority of people, especially those that read the tabloids and the press themselves. The press themselves have incited so much hatred towards myself, my wife, and even our children.
Windsor Castle wasn't just a palace that day. It was a court one where Harry stood accused, but no one allowed him to speak. From the moment he stepped through the towering gates, Prince Harry could feel it. The chill in the air wasn't from the stone walls or the English sky, it was coming from within. He expected tension. He expected discomfort. But nothing prepared him for what he found. This wasn't an audience with his father. This was a sentencing without a judge, without a jury, and without a voice. Harry was summoned, not invited, and the room made that crystal clear. King Charles sat at the head of the table, flanked by aides, posture perfect, papers stacked in front. Of him, like verdicts waiting to be delivered. He didn't greet his son. Not a nod, not a glance, just silence. A silence that screamed louder than anger ever could. Every gesture was rehearsed. Every pause, deliberate. Charles didn't come to listen, he came to finish something. Harry's heart sank deeper when he noticed who wasn't there. Prince William, his brother, once his closest ally, was nowhere in sight. The message was clear. The divide wasn't temporary, it was permanent. The absence said more than words ever could. The family wasn't fractured. It was finished. And then came the shift, the unexpected, the unthinkable. Princess Anne, known for her composure and neutrality, took the lead. She wasn't warm. She wasn't cold. She was clinical. This wasn't just protocol. This was a strategy. Charles had chosen silence not out of respect, but to amplify the message. When a king doesn't speak, it means everything has already been decided. Harry didn't just feel sidelined, he was being erased. Anne's presence wasn't a gesture of mercy. It was a calculated maneuver. She didn't speak until the room was still, didn't move until the moment was hers to command. And when she did, it was with authority Harry had never seen in her before. She wasn't reading a family update. She was delivering a royal verdict. Harry tried to catch his father's eyes one last time, but Charles remained motionless, like a statue carved from ice. That silence wrapped itself around Harry like a noose. There was no conversation, no debate, no explanation, just finality. He had walked in with a faint hope that maybe, just maybe, there would be room for understanding. Instead, he found himself facing a wall of silence built brick by the people he once called family. But Harry didn't know the silence was just the beginning soon. Words would cut deeper than anything unspoken. No hesitation, no emotion, just cold ink on paper. Anne stripped Archie and Lilibet of their birthright in a single breath. The moment Princess Anne opened the folder in front of her, the room shifted. It wasn't loud. There was no gasp. No one moved. Yet everything changed. The weight of centuries' titles passed through blood. Honor bound by legacy came crashing down on two names, Archie and Lilibet, and their father, seated helplessly nearby, could only watch. The decree was crisp, formal. It lacked any trace of sentiment. Effective immediately, she read. The children of Prince Harry shall no longer retain the styling of His or Her Royal Highness. No commentary, no explanation, just a definitive stroke across royal history. Harry's breath caught, but he said nothing at first. He didn't have time. His thoughts were sprinting ahead of his voice, trying to process a decision that had already been carved in stone. He finally found words barely audible, trembling, but they hit a wall of silence. Anne didn't pause. She didn't look up. She just continued reading, as if his voice hadn't even reached her ears. This wasn't a conversation. It was a proclamation. One meant to be heard, not debated. For Harry, it wasn't just the loss of a title, it was the beginning of erasure. Those names carried protection, privilege, presence. They gave his children not just symbolic standing, but an unspoken place in the royal future. Now, that lineage was severed. The titles weren't just dropped, they were discarded. It felt like a stain was being wiped clean from a page the family no longer wanted to read. What made it worse was the precision. The delivery wasn't cruel, but it was devastatingly calculated. Anne didn't falter, didn't soften. She moved through the decree like a surgeon performing a necessary amputation. Quick, clinical, unshakable. Even her voice remained even unmoved by Harry's silence, untouched by his rising grief. It was as though the royal family had decided that compassion was a luxury they could no longer afford. Harry realized then that this wasn't just about Archie and Lilibet. It was about drawing boundaries. The monarchy wasn't simply stepping back, it was shutting a door. A line had been drawn in the sand, and it wasn't done in anger, it was done in calculation. The California chapter, as they now called it, was being closed with ink, not fire. It was being buried without ceremony, and yet, beneath the calm formality of it all was a brutal truth. The family didn't just remove a title, they removed a future. The children had done nothing. They were innocent of politics and press. But to the crown, innocence meant nothing. What mattered was image. What mattered was control. And in that moment, control was everything. But if erasing titles was surgical, what came next felt like exile with chilling silence as its weapon. May 6th was Archie's birthday. The palace had photos and posts for other kids, but for him, nothing. Not even a whisper. Not a candle, not a card, not a carefully chosen throwback photo. The royal family's official channels, always precise with their social media rituals, went completely dark. They celebrated Lady Louise's equestrian milestone, posted cheerful flashbacks of Savannah Phillips at Trooping the Color, and even shared warm captions for royal children far removed from the line of succession. But for Archie, who once captured the world's imagination as a symbol of modern monarchy, nothing. The silence wasn't just noticeable, it was deliberate. In the world of royal protocol, omissions are never accidental. Everything is vetted, timed, and approved. So when Archie's name vanished from the calendar, the message was loud without a sound. No recycled photo from Frogmore. No neutral gesture. No happy birthday from the palace graphic. Just a blackout. It didn't just ignore the child, it erased him from the public eye. And for Harry, that silence struck harder than any spoken rejection. It wasn't a lapse in scheduling, it was a statement of exclusion. Behind the scenes, even palace aides whispered unease. Some called it cruel, others calculated. But the most disturbing truth was that it worked. Media outlets around the world picked up on it instantly. Tabloid headlines didn't need to invent scandal. They simply asked, why was Archie left out? The coverage went viral. Twitter lit up. And still, no correction, no last-minute post, no attempt to save face. The silence held. It echoed. To Harry, this was the crown's clearest signal yet. Stripping titles was legal. Skipping a birthday was personal. This was the monarchy telling the world that Archie was no longer in their frame, literally and symbolically. It wasn't just cold, it was cruel, and it drew the line even deeper between what had been and what would never be again. This wasn't about a cake or a caption. This was about rewriting the story in real time and choosing to leave Archie out of it. That absence on May 6th became more than just a footnote in royal drama. It became a turning point. It marked the moment when Harry knew that whatever hope he had left for reconciliation, for recognition, for his children's place in the lineage had evaporated. They weren't just being overlooked, they were being erased. And there would be no public outcry from inside those palace walls. No soft voices stepping forward, no regrets voiced through elegant statements, just that blank space where a birthday post should have been. And just when Harry thought the public silence was the worst part, the palace turned the screws behind closed doors. First came the titles, then came the money. The palace didn't just cut ties, they shut down Harry's future. The message arrived not as a whisper, but as a warning, a formal notice from Buckingham Palace that shattered the foundation Harry and Meghan had spent years building. It wasn't a suggestion, and it wasn't up for debate. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex were no longer permitted to use their royal titles in any commercial setting. Not for books, not for charity events, not for keynote speeches, or global partnerships. The titles weren't theirs to monetize anymore. What had once been a symbol of power and prestige had now been weaponized, and the monarchy was pulling the plug. From Netflix to memoirs to sold-out speaking engagements across continents, the brand known as Sussex had always leaned on something greater than its parts. The gravitas of Prince Harry and Duke of Sussex opened doors most celebrities couldn't touch. Those names weren't just royal, they were currency. They gave weight to projects, offered trust to investors, and created a sense of importance in every room they entered. But overnight, that currency collapsed. Without warning, everything that depended on royal prestige was suddenly radioactive. Behind the scenes, PR teams panicked. Lawyers scrambled. Contracts had to be re-examined. Brand deals that had been structured around Harry's royal standing faced legal red tape, and the palace didn't leave room for gray areas. Violate the directive, and legal consequences would follow. The monarchy's stance was ruthless. Royal status is not a license for profit, at least not for those beyond its inner circle. What once gave Harry global leverage was now a legal liability, and it wasn't just about titles, it was about control. The crown had found a pressure point that went deeper than honor or heritage. It targeted Harry's future, his financial independence, his global platform, his legacy beyond the palace walls. This wasn't exile, this was containment. Every appearance, every interview, every venture tied to the name Sussex now carried the risk of legal retaliation. The royal family wasn't playing defense. They were taking the fight straight to Harry's bank account. To many watching, it seemed personal. The timing, the tone, the totality of the restrictions. It didn't feel like policy. It felt like punishment. And once again, Harry found himself cut off, not just from tradition, but from opportunity. The very tools he had used to tell his story, to carve out his identity, to protect his family, had been stripped away. His brand wasn't just weakened, it was gutted. But behind the lawsuits and silence, Harry wasn't strategizing. He was crumbling, and witnesses saw it happen. When the room emptied, Harry didn't leave. He just sat still, pale, broken. This wasn't a prince. This was a son, undone. The silence that followed the decree wasn't just official, it was suffocating. Chairs scraped, papers shuffled, doors opened and closed. But Harry remained motionless, anchored by disbelief. For a man who once stood tall in military dress, who walked behind his mother's coffin with the world watching, who faced global media storms and personal tragedies with defiance, this was different. This was defeat. Eyewitnesses, those few still in the room after the royal meeting concluded, described a moment that didn't make headlines, but revealed everything. Harry didn't speak. He didn't cry. He didn't move. He simply sat, his shoulders hunched, his hands trembling, his eyes fixed on nothing. No aides approached, no arms wrapped around him. Meghan wasn't there to whisper comfort, nor were advisors hovering to offer strategy. For the first time in years, he was completely alone. The emotional toll was unmistakable. Whatever armor Harry had built over the years through war, loss, scandal, and relentless press intrusion was gone. What remained was a man stripped of his identity, his legacy, and now his place. This wasn't the fallout of politics or public image. This was familial, deeply personal, and utterly shattering. There had been no fight, no final plea, no royal redemption arc, just a decision carved in silence, and a son left in its aftermath. The palace hadn't just delivered a verdict, they'd buried something sacred. A relationship, a future, a bond between father and son, shattered not in fury, but in frost. The pain wasn't loud. It was the kind that seeps slowly, the kind that hollows. Because Harry hadn't just been punished as a royal, he had been dismissed as family, not argued with, not confronted, just dismissed, without ceremony, without regard, without a backward glance. And it was in that silence that the reality hit hardest. Harry wasn't just being told he no longer belonged, he was being shown it. Every unspoken word in that room carved him deeper than any headline ever could. There was no recovery plan, no PR pivot, just the cold, unrelenting truth that whatever tether had still bound him to the monarchy had been cut clean. The son who once carried the hopes of a modern monarchy had been reduced to an afterthought, one too risky to retain, too distant to embrace. But while Harry broke in silence, Meghan's absence spoke volumes, and not everyone took it as strength. She didn't need to make a statement. Her absence made it for her. Meghan didn't come. And everyone noticed. No official explanation, no apology, no statement released through a spokesperson. Meghan Markle, whose every public move has once sparked debate, speculation, and admiration, was nowhere to be seen. While Harry sat alone inside the walls of Windsor, absorbing the full weight of his family's final decree, the chair beside him remained empty. That emptiness became louder than any speech. It wasn't just a scheduling conflict, it was a calculated decision. And whether it was made in pain, protest, or protection, the result was seismic. Within palace corridors, her absence was instantly dissected. Insiders called it defiance, a quiet, razor-edged protest from a woman who no longer recognized the institution that had once embraced her with pomp and torn her apart with precision. Meghan's choice not to appear wasn't just a rejection of the meeting. It was a rejection of the monarchy's hold over her life. It was her way of saying, "I will not stand in this room and watch my children be erased." But not everyone interpreted it as strength. Some close to Harry saw it differently. For them, her absence didn't read as resistance. It felt like retreat. At a moment when Harry faced one of the most devastating personal reckonings of his life, he stood alone, no hand to hold, no voice beside his. And for a man already drowning in royal abandonment, Meghan's absence only deepened the silence. Some within his circle whispered that she should have been there, that solidarity isn't just about headlines, it's about presence when it matters most. Outside, the world watched. The British press spun stories of division. American outlets leaned toward defiance. Social media ignited with opinions. Was she making a powerful statement, refusing to participate in what she saw as a sham? Or had she abandoned Harry in his darkest hour? The question lingered, uncomfortably unanswered. And yet, for Meghan, silence has often been her most powerful weapon. It shields, it protects, it controls narrative. In choosing not to attend, she seized control in a palace where control is currency, but control comes at a cost. Because in skipping the moment, she didn't just distance herself from the decision, she removed herself from the battlefield altogether. And Harry, stripped of his past, was left to face his future alone. But what started as a family fracture now crossed a terrifying threshold into legal extinction. The monarchy spoke first, but now Parliament has spoken louder. They're making the exile law. What began behind palace doors has now spilled into the chambers of British government. In an unprecedented move, lawmakers have begun drafting legislation that doesn't just echo the Crown's decision, it codifies it. The message is unmistakable. This isn't about internal family disagreements anymore. This is about national identity, public resources, legal clarity, and most chilling of all, permanent separation. At the heart of the proposal is a demand to strip Prince Harry and Meghan Markle of any remaining royal branding or privileges. Not symbolic, not suggestive, absolute. From diplomatic protections to the use of Sussex in global engagements, everything tied to the monarchy's legacy is now under threat. What once rested in tradition is shifting into statute. And, for Archie and Lilibet, the implications are even more staggering. They're being formally reclassified not just in the public imagination, but in legal documentation as private citizens. No security entitlements, no ceremonial privileges, no space in the future of the firm. Behind these cold legal terms lies a wave of intention. British lawmakers want closure. They want to eliminate loopholes that allow ex-royals to blur the lines between royalty and celebrity. No more charity campaigns wrapped in royal flair. No more appearances traded on ancestral power. What was once tolerated in the name of diplomacy is now viewed as liability. The Crown has distanced itself. Now, the country's laws will do the same. And the speed of the shift is shocking. Where royal transitions once took years, managed with care and caution, this motion gained momentum like a political landslide. Media briefings were coordinated, parliamentary committees formed. Discussions began about citizenship, identity, and the fragile line between heritage and entitlement. What Harry and Meghan once framed as a personal journey toward independence is now being treated as a public matter of jurisdiction. The personal has become legislative. This new wave of policy doesn't just dissolve titles, it disarms them. It strips the Sussex family of any protective veil and recasts them as civilians subject to the same rules, vulnerabilities, and limitations as any other British-born expatriate. There will be no special exceptions, no return path, not even a ceremonial role at state events. The Crown has drawn a final line, and now Parliament is locking it in place. To the public, it may appear as politics. To the monarchy, it's self-preservation. But to Harry, this is erasure, not symbolic, not emotional, structural. The monarchy didn't just say goodbye, it's now making sure there's no way back. For Harry and his children, the doors aren't just closed, they're being cemented shut with the authority of law. But beyond law, beyond silence, one truth remains. This wasn't about titles anymore. It was about erasing a name. There were no fireworks, no press release, just silence, the kind that means it's over, forever. No headlines screamed his name. No statements from Buckingham Palace. No photos of smiling royals at reconciliatory meetings. Just a void, quiet and absolute. It wasn't a scandal that sealed Harry's fate. It wasn't a public breakdown or a final televised feud. It was the steady, methodical retreat of an institution that had decided, with chilling calm, to erase a prince without saying a word. The symbolic and the practical, the two threads that had always connected Harry to the monarchy, had both been severed. Titles stripped, roles eliminated, legal protections revoked, social ties dissolved. Even the smallest gestures, the palaces, birthday posts, official Christmas mentions, invitations to events, once automatic, disappeared. One by one, the visible signs of belonging faded, until there was nothing left to suggest he had ever been part of the family that once shaped his entire life. And with that came the sharpest truth. There would be no return. No public reconciliation, years down the line. No surprise attendance at royal weddings. No comeback at the next Jubilee. The institution wasn't waiting for Harry to come back. They had moved on without him, and they made sure the world knew it. The chapter hadn't been paused. It had been torn out quietly, efficiently, permanently. What stung the most was not just the exclusion, it was the omission, the way the narrative itself was being rewritten. Events that once included Harry were now spoken of in the past tense, without him. Projects he championed were reassigned, his accomplishments buried beneath new headlines. He wasn't just sidelined, he was being written out, erased from the story before it was even finished. This was not a prince who chose to step back. This was a son who had been let go by a family that decided distance was easier than forgiveness, by a crown that chose preservation over repair. The monarchy didn't slam the door, they made it disappear. And Harry, who had always believed in second chances, was left to understand that in this world, some bridges don't burn, they vanish without a trace. And maybe that's what hurt the most. Not the decisions themselves, but the silence that followed. No final word. No goodbye. Just that deafening absence, the kind that settles in your bones and makes you realize it's really over. Was this punishment? Or the Crown's quiet revenge? Drop your thoughts in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.